Sonic Forces brings the Sonic series back into the third dimension after its critical and fan success with Sonic Mania earlier this year. While Mania was a retro love letter made by the fans, Sonic Forces is by Sonic Team and is more in line with the gameplay of Sonic Generations. Is this the Sonic Generations follow-up I've been waiting for, or is it something subpar? Sonic Forces takes a darker approach to the story, though with that sort of forced Sonic humor mixed in. The story starts off with Dr. Eggman and his superpowered ally Infinite starting to take over Sonic's world. As destruction reigns over the land, Sonic and his friends try to stop Eggman, only to be terribly defeated. Now as Eggman rules over the world, a resistance starts to form with the help of Sonic's friends from previous games in the series. The newest member of the resistance is You, a custom avatar that brings all those third-grade fanfics you wrote on DeviantArt to life. Levels will have you act out missions for the resistance, while the cutscene intermissions between the levels help progress the story. Overall, I found the story to be interesting, though some of the comedic writing felt kind of conflicted with the more serious tone of the story at times. It was also incredibly short, only lasting about 2.5 to 3 hours tops if you take your time. It certainly felt like it had a very interesting start, but barely any substance in the middle and a pretty mediocre ending. It's pretty disappointing too, because Infinite seems like a pretty badass antagonist from the earlier parts of the game and the trailers we got ahead of the release. In the end, I liked the more serious tone of the story. It felt somewhat reminiscent of the more narrative-heavy adventure series. That fondness starts to wear off though pretty much right after the introduction of the game, as my hopes for an interesting, darker toned story with a cool villain began to increasingly fall apart. Sonic Forces can be broken up into 3 categories of gameplay. Much like Sonic Generations, you get the return of Modern Sonic and Classic Sonic. A new addition to the gameplay though is the avatar stages. These are levels where you play as your custom little avatar. At the start of the game you get the option to choose the type of animal you want your avatar to be. Each of the animals have their own variation of gameplay. Birds for example can double jump, while hedgehogs can do a grappling hook homing attack. There's a handful of animals to play as, and your options consist of a wolf, a rabbit, a cat, a dog, a bear, a bird, and of course a hedgehog. Along with being able to choose their species, your avatar gets a weapon called the Wispin. These weapons add a bit more variety to the platforming gameplay by giving your character some sort of power. The lightning whip will let you light dash through rings, while the flamethrower will give you a double jump. These weapons come in handy for combat but also the platforming. The last part of the avatar customization is the clothing. You can dress up your character with a bunch of different clothing and accessories that you earn as you beat levels, complete challenges, and get S ranks on certain levels. Now the levels for these avatars are just sort of a mess. They're usually more platform heavy, but their level design is generally just a complete mess. Rather than having a separate version of a level for each of the types of weapons you have, Sega decided to make each level have a bunch of different paths for each of the types of weapons. That would be really cool if the levels were designed well. However, when you played through a level, you sort of just feel like every section was forcefully put together, and the idea of how each of the weapons was supposed to work in this level came afterward. The avatar themselves is a bit of a pain to control. At times they feel incredibly light and I overestimate my jump, while other times they suddenly get heavy and fall straight downward mid-jump. Pair together these slippery controls with the force-to-fit puzzle piece level design and you get a pretty clumsy time. The modern and classic Sonic levels are a bit better, but they too fall into the problem of bad level design. Modern Sonic stages are very similar to Generations, and that's a good thing, but maybe they're too similar. Throughout the game I felt like I had seen a lot of these levels before. The worst part though is how they constructed them. Whereas Generations gave you pretty complete feeling levels, Forces gives you fragments of those levels. It feels like Forces took all the cinematic parts of the levels in Generations and said, hey, that's the entire level, let's just add 10 seconds of padding to the introduction and the ending and call it a day. It should be mentioned that all of these levels, not just the modern ones but all of them, are incredibly easy to get a rank S in. You can literally die multiple times in a level and you will still be able to get a great score. A very few amount of these levels are cool, but by the time I start having fun in them, the level is already over and I'm forced to play a classic stage or an avatar stage. Aside from just being short though, some of these levels have pretty broken design. I've been able to fall through the floor once, and there's a section that has you boost through a path that ultimately just sent me flying off the stage. I'm pretty sure that one stage actually sent me flying so far that I skipped the entire stage. Now on to Classic Sonic. Classic Sonic I'd say has the best controls out of all the stages. I never felt like I lost control with him while running through his stages. He has a similar control scheme to that of Generations, but his problems lie in level design. An issue I came across in all 3 types of levels but in smaller doses was the camera. At times the camera would move too far ahead of Sonic or the avatar, and I'd lose track of where the heck I was. Other times it doesn't move too quickly, but it still ends up not making the character the center focus of the gameplay. This wasn't an issue in every level, but it did show up at least a few times for all 3 types of levels. Now in total there's 30 story levels to complete, and it sounds pretty hefty until you realize that each of these levels are at most 2 minutes long. Take into consideration the loading times and the cutscenes and you get a game that's pretty much going to take you at most 3 hours to complete. 3 hours would be forgivable if the game had any substance, but it doesn't. Outside of the story missions, there are daily challenges and other side missions for you to complete, either during the campaign or after the campaign. These sections give you some replayability and post-game content, though I don't really have the motivation to go after them other than getting new items for my avatar. Now while I do enjoy creating my own character, their levels are my least favorite because of how oddly put together they are, and so the incentive to further customize my character pretty much dies there. Graphics for Sonic Forces is all over the place. On PS4 and PS4 Pro, the game runs at a mostly constant 1080p 60. On Xbox One, that's bumped down to 720p 60, while the Xbox One X is a bit weird. On the One X, the game will fluctuate between 1080p 60 and 1800p 60, depending on the level. Lastly, the Nintendo Switch version lowers the resolution to 720p both dock and in handheld mode, with a capped frame rate of 30 frames per second. Across all versions of the game, some sort of screen tearing issue is present that doesn't just affect the gameplay, but also the cutscenes oddly enough. Now while I'd argue the gameplay looks pretty good across the board outside of the Switch version, the cutscenes really do stand out as just really bad. They're all heavily compressed and you can see the noise from the video compression throughout the cutscene. There's just problems everywhere. Now I'd say the best version to play is the PS4/PS4 Pro version or the Xbox One X version. Some PC users have reported bugs on Steam, so I'd hold off on getting it on PC until more patches come in. On the regular Xbox One, you start to see a pretty low tier version of the game, which I'd say I guess is fine, but it has some of the more prominent screen tearing issues. The Nintendo Switch version is definitely the roughest one. It's low resolution just like the Xbox One, its frame rate is only half of what other versions is, and it's really apparent because it's a game about fast moving action. The Switch doesn't just have a low frame rate though, the amount of enemy and background elements take a hit too, with even lower quality textures in the Xbox One version even though it has the same resolution. I wouldn't recommend getting the Switch version even to those people already commenting before the review is even done by saying, "But Luis, the portability is much better than the technology, it's portable, that's what makes the difference."
Even though I am strong, need something more than me, someone to push me to victory.
Luckily, Sonic Forces continues the trend of having pretty good music, though there are a few exceptions. The main theme is pretty prominent in the game, pretty much playing anytime something really big happens, whether it's the lyrical or the instrumental version, it's there. That's fine though, because it's a really catchy song. A lot of the other songs feel out of place though. Sonic Forces has a lot of lyrical tracks on it, and while some of them are good, others feel like a poorly put together YouTube video where the creator just said, you know, I like this song, put it in there. Aside from the music, the voice acting seems pretty decent. I didn't think they were outstanding, but I also didn't think they were bad either. The only thing is that the character customization lets you choose a voice for your character, though they never actually speak in the game. It's pretty much only there to add slight variations to the grunts that the character makes. Sonic Forces is rough. It's half the game I wanted it to be. You can see evidence throughout the game that it was trying to continue the Generations formula, but it just didn't have the right amount of polish, the level design, or the attention to detail that Generations got. I didn't expect to find so many graphical issues with the game, but the cutscene compression is bad and the prominent screen tearing is pretty much in every single version of the game. It's a very short game with very little substance to the gameplay and a story that showed promise, only to pretty much fall apart by the end of the game. It's sad to say that Sonic Forces is just not worth buying in my opinion. It sucks to say because I was cautiously optimistic for the game and didn't start judging it based on a 1-minute demo that came out a week ago. But that does it for my review of Sonic Forces for the Xbox One, PS4, Nintendo Switch, and PC. If you do have any questions about the game, feel free to ask me in the comment section down below. As always, if you like these in-depth reviews, let me know by dropping a like on the video, share the video with your friends, it really does help me out, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you all very much for watching, and stay tuned, I do have a review planned for Super Lucky Tail on the Xbox One X, and Doom for the Nintendo Switch later this week. See you all in the next one.